Hello, my friends. This is Bart Boge, coming to you again from the Artist's Grotto here in frigid northeast Wisconsin. And I thought in this episode I would talk about the books that influenced me as I wrote Regarding Tiberius. I've decided to go in chronological order versus order of importance. And you'll probably see that put together in your head why I'm doing that as we go. So, first of all, going back to my high school days, a very strong literary influence on me was Shakespeare. This is my Pelican Shakespeare, Complete Works of Shakespeare. And I don't pretend to be an expert on Shakespeare, by the way. It's not making any assumptions that I know what I'm talking about, other than I know what I like. And I really liked the Shakespeare tragedies, particularly Macbeth and Hamlet. Not sure why those two, but I like them. And I think if you read Regarding Tiberius, you will see the influence of both of those Shakespearean plays in the plot and character development that occurs in my book. So, if you have read it, you know what I'm talking about. If you haven't, hey, something to look forward to. And we move up shortly after high school. I went through a religious conversion. Now, I had grown up in a marginally Christian home, but I really solidified my Christian faith not long after I graduated from high school. The church I went to really stressed an individual's commitment to read and understand the scriptures. So the second book that I would cite as an influence is the King James Bible. I'm not a King James only kind of guy, but that's what I had, and it's very poetic in its language, akin to Shakespeare, because it was written about the same time that Shakespeare was writing his plays. And of course, the Old Testament and New are full of rich stories and rich characters. Just from a literary side, forget the religious component. Just from a literary standpoint, it's a brilliant book and so important because it has influenced the world so much in the 3,500 years the book has been written. So that would be the next one. And this is going to be a strange one coming right after the Bible. Albert Camus' The Plague. The reason I like this book is that I think it's a good example of writing a book that's meant to influence and persuade, but doing so in a way that's not shrill or preachy. Albert Camus is, a French existentialist, and this book was written to illustrate and give weight to existentialism as a philosophy. And in a nutshell, it uses the metaphor of the bubonic plague it uses the bubonic plague as a metaphor for death. And it's about the plague coming to a small town in northwestern Africa, a French colony kind of town, where people just randomly start dying and you don't know who's going to be next, and why some people live and some people don't. The reason I like it, aside from the fact that it was very well written and won a Nobel Prize for literature, but the idea of writing a book that could persuade, but to do so on such a almost insidious level, I guess, such a natural and unobtrusive way, was an inspiration for my book, because Regarding Tiberius is definitely a Christian book and geared in that direction, but I hope, it is my great hope, that it's a good read, even if you aren't a Christian or aren't really interested in things Christian. I do hope that after reading it, if the reader isn't a Christian, that they would give the claims of Christ greater consideration. I suppose that would be a pretty clear goal. I don't think that's tough to read into the text once you finish the book. But I also just want people to enjoy it as an adventure and as a touching story. So when I think of my goals for the book, Camus' book kind of remind me of that, I guess, for better or for worse. Next book, I don't have a copy to show you, but it would be, actually it's two books by the same author. The Hunt for Red October and Red Storm Rising, both by Tom Clancy. And the reason I mention those, I don't really write like Clancy at all, but I was inspired by the pacing of his books. They were just incredible page turners. I can remember actually being frustrated that my eyes could not read the words off the page fast enough to keep up with what my mind was constructing when I was reading these stories. And so he would write at this breakneck pace, but then he would have these asides where he would talk about weapon systems or tactics or technologies. And these asides would serve two purposes. One, it would give his whole story a little more weight and credibility. And two, it would just give you a break, a little breathing room to catch your breath before launching right back into the fray. And I've tried to do that with Regarding Tiberius. Because it's a long book, I really wanted to make sure the pacing was brisk so that a person wouldn't get bogged down in it. So it moves. I tried to put my foot on the gas the whole way. But I do have brief asides where I talk about tactics, Roman era military tactics, construction of citadels, armor, weaponry, that kind of thing. There's a little bit of that, not too much, because I don't want to paint myself as an expert in all things Roman either, but I do want to create enough credibility that a reader can lose themselves, him or herself, in the story and feel that what they're being told is credible and believable. Okay. Then, most recently, and very big influences, are the works of Adrienne Mayer. Now, Adrienne Mayer is a professor at Stanford University who's done a lot of work in the ancient Near East, exploring things like the myth of the Amazon and the two books that she wrote that I gravitated to were these. First is Greek Fire, Poison Arrows, and Scorpion Bombs, Biological and Chemical Warfare in the Ancient World. This was really neat. this gave me a lot of material, creative material to draw from. Because as it turns out, WMDs are not a new phenomenon. WMDs did not start with the Bush administration. WMDs have been around for about 3,000 years. And her book explains all that. And then there was this one. Biography of Mithridates VI, the Poison King, the life and legend of Mithridates, Rome's deadliest enemy. This book was really important because as I was developing Helena's character, I needed a setting that would be believable. And she's this princess of a small principality, but I wanted to ground her in a culture where her very proactive nature would make sense. And that, for me, was Turkey, circa 1 BC, right around the turn of the millennia. Because Turkey was a melting pot of Greek, Roman, and Persian influences. And for a woman who's got a lot of agency and does a lot of amazing things, I needed a context where that was believable. Because sad to say, in the Greek world, women didn't have a lot of agency. It was not a good time to be an intelligent woman, because your intelligence wasn't likely to be used. You weren't allowed to own property. You weren't allowed to participate in a financial transaction that was worth more than a bushel of wheat. I think I remember reading that. Pretty awful, and Roman women didn't have it much better. But the Persian women could own property, could own small businesses, and could aspire to almost every level of government. Women led Persian armies into battle. At one point, a woman was the admiral of the entire Persian fleet. Women were secretary of the treasury for the empire. And of course, there were any number of queens that ruled Persia. So I was thankful for this book and the lineage of this particular character that I could tie my character to, and gave, I think, the story quite a bit of credibility, because as crazy as this guy's life was, this isn't fiction, this really happened. And so weaving my fictional character into the story of Mithridates VI was a lot of fun, and I think made the whole book more enjoyable to read. So those are some of my literary influences, if you will, in the writing of Regarding Tiberius. And by all means, if you have any questions or comments, post them below. I'll put the links to all the books I've mentioned in the descriptions down below. And stay tuned, I've got more coming. But goodbye for now from the frigid artist's grotto in the North Woods of Wisconsin.